Hello everyone. I'm going to do part 5 now of the Amber Heard and Johnny Depp story, and I'm going to now look at the op-ed 2018. So at that stage we had a number of newspapers and magazines had been producing hit pieces on Johnny Depp, including The Sun, but not just The Sun. TMZ had also published articles about the protective order. They were the first ones, and we now know that Amber Heard had called them to say, please photograph this side of the face. And we also know that it was fabricated. She didn't have any bruise the day before or the day after. And notably, Johnny Depp had not been in the country for a week beforehand. So it was at the very minimum a week-long bruise that should have been more visible the days before. And if it did fade away the very next day, well, that's a coincidence, isn't it? But could she really have put makeup on to hide it for 7 days and then remove that makeup just in time for the courthouse appearance? And then in testimony in the Virginian trial, she forgot which side of the face it was on. It does seem a bit suspicious. Supposedly from a phone, a wall phone that he had appeared in one of his movies, I think it was. Anyway, and a souvenir wall phone that he supposedly threw at her, leaving this small bruise that was still visible a week later. I mean, who knows how bruises go, but it doesn't seem like it really matches any of the factual evidence. And then we have the situation that even if it was a bruise, there's ample opportunity for someone else to have inflicted it. She was pictured with James Franco. James Franco wasn't aware that she had a bruise. He could have created it. And then there's all of her renter friends, her sisters. She could have done it to herself. There's all sorts of other possibilities there. But whatever the situation, TMZ had decided to run that story as well as the cupboard story, where Johnny Depp had smashed up cupboards, which we now know was a setup by Amber Heard. She was giggling at the start and the end of the video, not in any fear for her life at all, although she told TMZ she was, because she cut out those bits. And TMZ ran it as a hit piece, not ignoring the context that was the day that he had lost $520 million, potentially stolen by Amber Heard or with her support. We don't know that, but her laughing about it sure does make her look guilty, doesn't it? But we don't know that. We don't know that for sure. We don't know if she stole that money, if someone else stole that money, if it just disappeared. Who knows? But what we do know is that by the time of the op-ed, Amber Heard had a big smile on her face. By that stage, she had decided to admit to her massive lying about Johnny Depp. He thought that it was all made up by all of these tabloid newspapers, and he was starting to see that it was actually made up by her, linking and leaking things to these tabloids. And even the most gutter-wrenching ones, the Sun newspaper, were actually just repeating her lies. They weren't making it up, at least this time. And maybe the others weren't either. So when we had this op-ed, why did she bother with it? Well, the simple answer is that ACLU wanted her to. That she had said that she was going to give them $3.5 million. She'd already given them a little bit. And they wanted a return from their investments. They wanted her to write this article. It was ACLU's idea. She arguably didn't want to do it. It exposed her. And her first drafts, she wrote what they said and put in Johnny Depp's name, but they made sure to remove it. They got lawyers involved to say, well, we don't want it to look like it's Johnny Depp. Maybe it was someone else that hurt her 2 years earlier. And of course, by implication, that says it was him. Some people have argued that it could have been anyone. She didn't mention his name, but that's not how defamation works. As long as a third party could identify them, it is still defamatory. And it's pretty easy to note he was the only one she was accusing. It's not like she accused 20 different people of domestic violence. It's not like she said, well, I was once the figure of domestic violence. No, she said 2 years ago, and that was Johnny Depp, because there was nobody else. And we all knew it was him. Everybody knew, and it seriously hurt him. And this time he said, no, this is not something made up by the Washington Post. Washington Post is far too reputable a newspaper. They're not like the Sun. They're not even like the Rolling Stone. Rolling Stone magazine, I think is the word. They are a highly respected newspaper. It was supported by ACLU, who are highly respected, and in return she got to be the actual proper figure for domestic violence for ACLU. They didn't even worry that she wasn't donating the full 3.5 million. She got to keep a bit. They even paid her for it. So did the Washington Post. She was in articles and interviews. She got even bigger movie roles, and Warner Brothers and DC Comics decided to give her a second go at Aquaman 2. And in spite of her being, according to their chief for DC Comics unit, completely incompatible with Jason Momoa and a terrible actress. No chemistry. Something that we had heard back in 2009 from the director of The Rum Diary, who wanted to remove her from the film because she wasn't good enough. Of course, this doesn't mean she's the worst actress in the world, just that she wasn't quite at that level that they wanted. She was okay, but not amazing. She wasn't Johnny Depp level. Not that Johnny Depp's the best in the world, but he's a lot better than she is. He is a genuine superstar. She's, well, not. And that is the problem. And she wanted to push herself as this domestic violence spokesperson. She must have been quite nervous about it, from what the ACLU testified. She was worried that it would come back and bite her, and because of that she took out 2 different insurance claims. She went with Travelers Insurance, who have ended up supporting her with unlimited funds, still supporting her through an appeal as well. And New York Marine, who didn't even want to give her $1 million. And just a lazy $1 million, geez, wouldn't even give her that. She arguably didn't need it. She had $33.5 million in the divorce settlement, so why did she need this much? Perhaps just to have that argument to say, oh, I can't afford anything, oh, this is costing me so much, that's why I'm not donating, all this sort of stuff. Who knows? Did she really need this money? How much of that money has she got left? Did she take 520 million, or did she take some smaller amount? What, did she pocket anything from all of those years of Johnny Depp paying for everything for her? I mean, he was paying for everything for her, for Raquel Pennington, for Josh Drew, for Io Tillett, for Whitney Henriquez, the whole lot of them. Everything was paid for. They must have saved at least some of it, surely, but who knows. So why did Amber Heard write this piece? Was it to hurt him further? No, it was to further her own career. It was so that she could get bigger and better movie roles, so she could appear on television shows as this amazing person, this icon, and it was all a lie. This was not really even about destroying Johnny Depp. This was just taking advantage of it. She had won the UK trial, or she declared it a victory at least, because she had betrayed Johnny Depp. He had expected her to take his side against this terrible magazine or terrible newspaper that was known to tell lies and had defamed the both of them in their relationship. Except that in secret, she had told them. She had told them those lies, and they were caught completely off guard. So when they got to the op-ed, he said enough was enough. He was not going to trust her. Not anymore. Not even slightly. She was the worst of the worst. And even though the odds were against him, he was going to fight this with everything he had. He was going to pull out all the stops against all the odds and try to win this case. And why was it against all the odds? Because the law is seriously against people trying to launch defamation proceedings. And they're against men, they're in favour of women, they're particularly against men in domestic violence cases, and even though this technically wasn't, it may as well have been. And then the UK judgment was against him. And even though she wasn't actually a defendant, she was claiming she was. It all made it that hard. And he was probably going to lose his career and never recover. But he tried. And he wouldn't back down, because he knew by then that he'd been set up as this giggling psychopath. Well, perhaps I shouldn't say psychopath. This giggling person that looked like, acted like there was something seriously wrong with her. Perhaps we say she has histrionic personality disorder or whatever it is that she has. But that doesn't really explain it. This is just somebody that wanted him to stay with her, didn't want him to leave, and wasn't going to let him leave. the typical domestic violence abuser who now, because of agenda, was able to pretend that she was the victim, and some people at least were believing her. This was important in so many ways beyond simply a few $1 million that he might get that he's never bothered to collect. This was important for everyone. Anyway, that's it for me. Bye bye now.